With Dalai Lama birthday due next week, our principal diplomatic correspondent Sidhan Sibal spoke to Pempa Sering, the president of the Tibetan government in exile in India. Sering talks about G7 statements calling on China to respect universal human rights, the Chinese president's Hong Kong visit. Listen in.
G7 summit last week in Germany. It was dominated by, of course, Russia-Ukraine conflict, but the joint statement did mention about Tibet's the human rights issues, both in Tibet and Xinjiang. How do you see this joint statement by the G7 grouping mentioning about Tibet and, of course, calling on China to do more, especially when it comes to human rights situation in Tibet?
Right now, because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, everybody focuses on Russia. But both the NATO and the United States and the G7 countries recognize the fact that China is the long-term competition and also a challenge to the global democratic world order. In that sense, G7 mentioning Tibet on fundamental human rights is significant. That shows a shift in their policies and focus on the Sino-Tibet conflict. Really appreciate the G7 for coming out with this statement, not just on Tibet, but also on Uyghur. I prefer to call it Uyghur instead of Xinjiang, because that's the name given by China. And China tries to sinicize everything, including names. Now, if you go on the Tibetan map, it will be very difficult to read Tibetan names because it's all sinicized. So they also try to call Tibet as Xizang, which is not acceptable.
So one interesting development that has happened in last few hours is that the Chinese president has gone to Hong Kong and talked about how they are basically trying to grow Hong Kong in terms of its economic development and the other Chinese policies. How do you see this visit of Chinese president to Hong Kong, given that Hong Kong has a special status and they had to follow a certain pact with the Brits when it comes to the human rights issues in that place? So how do you see this visit?
China has already gone against international law. So what has been agreed between British and the Chinese after the takeover in 1997, China has trampled on all those agreements, and then there were, you know about the developments in the last few years, and now Hong Kongers are spread all over the world as refugees. President Xi has not traveled outside China for the last more than 2 years, and people believe that he will not travel internationally. So Hong Kong now is more or less under China. So the visit may, in a way, be President Xi's message to the world that Hong Kong is very much part of China, and they are trying to improve the economic condition of China. But without freedom, it's very difficult to engage with China economically also.
There are concerns about who next after His Holiness, and there are questions about reincarnation. China has its own view about they appointing Dalai Lama, the next Dalai Lama. What's the viewpoint of the Tibetan leadership vis-a-vis the Chinese, what the Chinese have been saying, and what you expect from India regarding the incarnation?
His Holiness reincarnation is solely dependent on the decision of His Holiness alone, because he is going to be reincarnated. A communist government that does not believe in religion itself cannot be responsible for recognition of reincarnation of His Holiness Dalai Lama. Even if they come up with another candidate as a reincarnated Dalai Lama, that will not be acceptable, not only to the Tibetans but to the whole world community. And U.S. government has already taken a position on this in the form of amendment to the 2002 Tibet Policy Act. Now it's called the 2020 Tibet Support and Policy Act. That I think many countries will also eventually replicate. But as far as His Holiness is concerned, His Holiness says that according to some predictions, His Holiness is going to live up to 113 years of age. So right now it's too early to talk about his reincarnation. He will live for long.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.